All right, hey, what's up, everyone? This is the Bloody Elbow Vivisection. I'm Zane Simon. I'm joined by Victor Rodriguez. We are going over Invicta FC 8 today because it's a hell of a busy week. We've got a shitload of fights to talk about, and we're just trying to do as many of these and pay as much attention to everything as possible. Victor, how you doing today?
I am doing marvelous. Hello, Zane. Hello, Internet. And I am very excited for this card. This is going to be a lot of fun. We got a packed week, like you mentioned, but this is going to be this is going to have a hell of a payoff, and I'm really looking forward to it. So
Yeah,
let's
I
do
mean,
this.
after it feels like after a lot of dead weeks where we've either had one kind of mediocre show or no shows or just things haven't been that exciting. Suddenly this week is just coming. It's just like here's a shitload of MMA. All of it's awesome. You better make time because if you want to have a social life, this is not the week to do it.
No, no, we got a glut of fights, and with a lot of talent, and a lot of these events are pretty stacked. But this should deliver, as Invicta has had some very exciting events, and I don't think this one's going to disappoint at all.
No, it's definitely slightly lower on big names because a lot of the big names have left for the UFC, but it feels like every name they do have outside of Cyborg and Honchak is on this card.
Yes. Hanchak, who recently had a birthday, I believe, this week. So happy birthday to her.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah. All right.
Um, so before we jump right into it, I think, as we've been doing for a lot of these small show cards, and I think as we want to keep doing, we should talk just a little bit about where Bellator is right now because,
That would be
um,
nice yesterday.
yeah,
I think you mean Invictus, but yes, yes, that's also good. We can also talk about that. Yes.
yeah, it feels like, I mean, because especially, for a lot of these smaller shows, you get one card every 2 or 3 months. It pays to do a little bit of a heads up check on just where everything is. It's more than just
Yes.
saying like the weekly UFC grind is you don't need to nobody who's following the sport needs to know where the UFC is that week.
No. No, we got a pretty good idea. When you're putting on two shows on the same day on opposite sides of the world, I think we got an idea of maybe more or less where you might be, So
Yeah.
yeah, this is a little different due to inactivity, but
So
yeah,
yeah, what stuck out to you about recent Invicta moves? I mean, there've been a bunch of them. They're on Fight Pass now. This is their first show in how many months? Like 10, I want to say.
I'd like to think it was about 9 or 10 months. I don't exactly remember when the last one was.
Let's see. The last one was
Um,
December 7th, so
yeah,
it's
well,
about 10
9
months,
months,
nine
about
months.
10 months, just about. Yeah, yeah, almost 10. Yeah, Invicta, they've gone through some transitions. Most notably, which was actually one of the first ones that caused them to go on this long hiatus, was that unfortunately they had to part ways with Janet Martin, who was their previous matchmaker and also, I believe, assisted in operations with Shannon Knapp. That obviously left a bit of a void. Shannon Knapp had to pretty much take on the brunt of most of the responsibilities in the promotion, so they brought on Julie Kedzie as matchmaker. They ended up signing a few other people. They rearranged a couple of things in-house, and now, as you mentioned, they're on Fight Pass. So they'll be with this broadcast partnership with the UFC, and we'll be seeing them there on a more dependable and stable platform.
Yeah, I mean, I think I know that some of that internal reshuffling was apparently on account of some pretty poor mismanagement. It sounds
Mm-hmm.
like there was
Yeah.
some, it sounds like there was a lot of assurance that Invicta, that some of the people internally were going to get bigger and better things done and have things sorted out, and then it just ended up being a lot of money poured into nothing. So I think that reshuffling and bringing in Kedzie was definitely a good move for Invicta overall. But it's also meant a layoff that, right as Invicta was really starting to build some momentum, that it's hard to say they could really afford. Because especially when you consider, like, in that layoff time, too, they've lost almost every, like 3/4 of their big name roster.
Yeah, they have. They lost a lot of steam. I mean, they were gaining some really solid momentum, uh, putting on some really fun events, some really fun fights, and Fight of the Year nominees even, which a lot of people probably didn't expect from an all-women's promotion. That being said, though, they haven't lost any of the goodwill that the fans have. A lot of the love that people still have for Shannon Knapp, and a lot of the desire to see these athletes go out there and compete. And we got a few still, even though some of the larger names or some of the more popular names have perhaps moved on to the UFC. We still have some pretty popular fighters, or fighters that you can see the potential for them to move on and become bigger than they are now, or perhaps bigger than they expect.
Yeah, I mean, certainly most of women that Invicta built up,
Yeah.
they did so very quickly and starting with minimal hype. I mean, it wasn't like, um, you know, Jessica Penne and even Joanne Calderwood or Tisha Torres or Rose Namajunas were coming into Invicta with people going, "Oh, this is the greatest thing ever." I mean, there was maybe a little hype behind Calderwood, but
Yeah.
most of these women were built on Invicta shows through Invicta
Yeah.
promotion.
Well, Namajunas, I think she made her pro debut in Invicta, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
She had a few amateur fights under her belt, and then she came in and just started blazing in some of these exciting and just very memorable performances and celebrations too.
yeah.
Not to be, yeah, yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I think the big thing for me is just hoping that the Fight Pass platform means that they get a consistent revenue stream. They're not refunding people every third event.
Yeah,
Um,
every
and
other event.
yeah, and
Yeah.
that they hopefully with that, like, maybe they have to scale back their budgeting a bit. Maybe this isn't quite they maybe not getting quite as much per show for their more successful pay-per-view outings that they put on.
Mm.
Um, but they refocus maybe a bit more on developing prospects rather than attracting big names, rather than keeping people like Cyborg and Conan around.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But if they scale back a little, they can keep putting on consistent shows. Each show makes enough money to keep putting on the next show and to keep developing and bringing in more young talent and pushing them towards the UFC. I think that's
Right.
going to be a much more focused goal down the road. Even though it's been a pretty focused goal in the past. I mean, they had no problem giving up women for the bantamweight division, and they gave up every straw weight they have, it feels like.
Yeah,
So,
they gave away a lot of that, but I'm not really privy to what their financial situation has been or is now. I am a little disappointed that they did have to move away from the online pay-per-view. I mean, they had the infrastructure problems at first. They had to give away a few shows for free. They decided to partner with Ustream, thinking that was going to be more dependable, and then they crashed Ustream. Now,
yeah.
anyone who wants to talk about how, well, Invicta is not really as popular as people are saying, people aren't really watching as much, they crashed Ustream. I mean, you have that little map that shows you where people are watching from around the world, and I mean, it's like from everywhere there was at least some interest, and I don't know if maybe Fight Pass will limit that scope. I don't know what the revenue sharing is going to be like or anything. I just hope it's better for them in the long run, because this is a card that I would have gladly paid $20 for if they
Hmm.
were still using the online pay-per-view on the strength of how they handle their product and the quality that you expect from the fighters. I would have very easily given $20 to $25. I know a lot of people wouldn't, but hey, it is what it is, and they've found a new home.
Indeed. So, let's jump into the card then. Speaking of, a card that we would be willing to pay $20 for and are getting for free because we have Fight Pass, or relatively
Right.
free. I mean, I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah,
I'm not getting into this whole debate about whether you know, whether you pay for each individual item in the video library or whether you only pay for the ones you actually use. But
yeah. I don't know about that. Let me tell you something. With all the WEC and Pride fights that I've watched on Fight Pass, I mean, I have bled the UFC with all that. If this
Mhm.
is all you want, $10 a month, I'm gonna take advantage of that, dude. Believe me.
Yeah.
So yeah,
No, I'm really happy with it. But
yeah,
anyway, so first up we got JJ Aldrich and Delaney Owen. So Aldrich
yes,
is making her pro debut. Owen's
yes,
2 fights into her career. I
right,
believe they are both making their Invicta debut. Yep, they're both
yes,
making their Invicta debut.
they are.
And neither of them are really fighting out of a big camp or
No.
anything like that. You got any insight on these women beyond just?
Well, yeah, I got a few. They both have amateur records, which well, actually, I wanted to mention something about that a little later. But they both have Aldrich is 7-4 as an amateur. Delaney Owen is 7-2. Aldrich, curiously enough, she's got 4 submissions and 1 TKO. She lost to Raquel Pennington, who's known for being an Invicta veteran and being on the Ultimate Fighter, and she also beat new UFC signee Kaylin Curran at one point. This again, all as amateur, so who knows what the pros will hold for her. And then you got Delaney Owen, who is, as you mentioned, 2-0 as a pro, 7-2 as an amateur, 3 submissions. You know, they're both they seem to be now. This is probably the best point for them to start as pros and get that sort of seasoning to move on to the next step in their careers. So both pretty talented ladies. They're I think they're ready for the pros now at this point, and this is going to be a great. Well, obviously Delaney's already still fighting pro, but this is going to be a great platform for them to move on. I guess.
Yeah, and well, I mean, they're straw weights too, so whoever
Yes.
looks good could be within 3 or 4 fights from getting a short notice call up to the UFC to take on somebody. I mean, the
Mm-hmm.
UFC's got a lot of women in their divisions that have,
Mm-hmm. If
four and
not,
zero
if
records, 3-0,
right.
3-1. So, it
Yeah,
any
or if
any
not, yeah.
oh,
No, I'm sorry. No, go ahead.
anyone who has in any strawweight or bantamweight right now who gets more than 4 or 5 fights under her belt is probably looking at the potential for getting a short notice call up for a fight.
Right, and it's not just that, but it's either the possibility of being signed by the UFC and the new women's division that they formed or that they're in the process of forming, but also that we also need to remember, as we mentioned previously, Invicta does still want to be seen as not just a feeder league, but a place that women want to go and potentially stay, even if it's only for a while. And it wouldn't be an uncomfortable spot. Strawweight, a lot of movement going on there, and with the ladies that have gone on to the UFC, these two could potentially stand out from what I've seen them and from their performances. They might be able to do pretty big things if they stay consistent.
hmm Then we got an atomweight bout next. Jody Esquibel
Yes.
versus Jin Yu Frey.
Yes.
And Esquibel's a
Yes.
Jackson Winklejohn fighter who has
Yeah.
most recently lost. She's got 2 Invicta fights under her belt. Most recently, a loss to current tough uh, contender Alex Chambers.
Yes.
And Jinyu Frey is fighting out of Moeller MMA, and
Hmm.
this is her Invicta debut.
Right. Escobel, just a slight correction. Her last fight was that loss to Chambers, but that was actually April of last year. So
Mm.
it wasn't that recent. Wondering how the layoff is going to affect her. She does have a boxing record, curiously enough. She's 6-7 with 1 draw as a
Huh.
boxer. Yeah. Sits on her punches. 3-1 as a pro. Pretty smart with mixing up her punches and kicks. I like that about her, even though she's kind of certain strikers and still in MMA have this habit of not moving side to side. She's very in and out, back and forth with a lot of her movements. So maybe she's made those adjustments. I don't know really what else to expect when someone's been out that long and has still been training as she has, or what her ground game is going to look like. But
hmm
yeah, she better mind her P's and Q's because Jinyu Frey packs a lot of strength. I mean, she's got serious power in her hands.
Cool.
Yeah.
Um, and then so Yeah, didn't you say she had like an impressive knockout? I'm seeing here Darla Harris.
Darla Harris was the name. Yeah, she that was a highlight reel knockout. I mean, as a pro, she's got one submission and one knockout, and
Yeah.
she's had 5 amateur fights where she's 3-2. You know, one TKO, one knockout, one decision. Very solid ground control. She's got a relentless attack when it comes to chaining submission attempts. She'll go for one thing and then another. And she seems to have pretty solid cardio. So I'm not really sure how this is going to go, but if Jody keeps it standing, I'd like to hope that her defense and her movement are on point.
Cool.
Frey doesn't seem to have much wasted movement when she's standing. So another matchup that's going to be pretty solid. I like this very much.
So, yeah, then we've got an interesting kind of. This is very much a fighter in development story next with Veronica Rothlhauser and Charmaine Tweet.
Yes.
In which Rothlhauser was pegged early on as sort of like an up-and-coming hot prospect, expected to do big things for Invicta, fighting, either at their 145 division. They were hoping to get her, maybe an eventual cyborg challenger, all the cyborgs moving down.
Yeah.
Or, fighting even as high as 155 as they're starting to open up an even higher division, open up women's lightweight.
Yeah.
And then she, I believe, pulled out. Was it her that pulled out of her last fight? I want to say that she couldn't make weight and that her last fight was canceled.
That I don't remember, unfortunately. I'm not too sure about that. Although, if she were, I wonder what her weight cuts are like. I remember there was I think it was the third or second Invicta event where there were a small group. I want to say maybe 3 or 4 competitors that were not able to make weight, and it got a little strange there. I don't know if maybe it's the fact that I don't know if it's a size and divisional thing, maybe, or I'm not really sure where that came from, and I'm not sure if she's the person you're thinking about that would have.
Yeah, I'm not 100% on that. I'm remembering that somebody at the last fight ended up in a last-second change-up, and I don't remember. Maybe it was at the last event. Oh no, that it was. Kelly Cobold versus no wait, no, that's not it either. Never mind. I'm not sure what I'm thinking of here. This is not helpful. Oh, there we are. Olivia von Plettenberg, Laura Sanko, Invicta F6. That's what it was.
Okay.
That was where the yes. So Rothenhauser has not had trouble, at least too much trouble that I can see with making weight, whatever weight she's scheduled at, but she is one of the rare women who fights up as high as lightweight and doesn't look too terribly out of shape doing it.
Well, she's 5'11". Yeah. That's not very common for female fighters. 4 fights under her belt, 3-0 as an amateur, 1-0 as a pro. 2 knockouts, like straight knockouts. The 5-second knockouts in a row that she had. She finished 2 fights like that, and then she knocked out Catalina Malangahu in her first pro fight. In a strange thing that I've noticed is that she seems to wing a lot of hooks. She throws some wild punches, but when she throws that one shot down the middle, it's hard to watch. It's really hard to watch. Like, you see the facial contortions of the opponent. I mean, yeah, she's got pretty great timing when it comes to that, but I don't really see much going on with her other strikes. And I haven't seen much of her ground game. I don't think anyone really has, because she's been knocking out all these other fighters as is. So that's going to be a big question mark.
Indeed.
Yes.
And Tweet's definitely kind of on the older vet route, somebody that it feels like, I mean, this is kind of a real prospect test for Rothenhauser, just to see if she can come out of the gate and really be somebody to watch. A fighter that's experienced and a dangerous grappler, but not the most physically dominating presence. So should be an interesting fight for that, to see if Rothenhauser can come out and put it on somebody who's got a bit more veteran experience.
It should, and it should be noted also that she is a Muay Thai champion. She's got some pretty heavy experience in that. 5-4 as a pro. All of her wins have been by submission.
Yeah.
Curiously enough, it's strange. I'm not sure how this is going to go. How she's going to deal with Veronica's range. She's fought some impressive opposition, and her first submission loss was to Ronda Rousey. Curiously enough, but. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. There's a lot of question marks surrounding this one, so I'd earmark that one.
Yeah. So next up we got Alexa Grasso and Ashley Cummins. This is looks like it's going to be a strawweight bout, I believe.
Yeah, 115, yes.
And Grasso is a undefeated fighter coming in 4-0.
Yep.
Fighting off the Mexican circuit. This is her Invicta debut, and Cummins is 3-2, and coming off a pair of losses to Joanne Calderwood. No shame in that.
Nope.
And Emily Kagan.
No shame in that either.
Yep.
No shame in that either. I remember that fight. That was up in the air fight too. Grasso, I'm really interested in this one here because. Well, she fights out of Lobo Gym, which is the same gym that Irene Aldana fights out of, who is also on this card later on. I've seen some grappling videos of her, and she is pretty impressive. The problem is that I haven't seen any of her ground game in MMA. She does have a relentless finishing instinct, and she's very confident in both her ground game and in her stand-up. I'm not sure how she's going to put that together. She's just going to have like a very basic, solid boxing game. But this is going to be. I mean, she's already got some pro experience under her belt. They don't seem to have. I don't know if they have an amateur circuit in Mexico or not. But this ought to be pretty good, especially with how she's done with her grappling and what I've seen of it.
Yeah, it's just a little unfortunate that I think right now the Mexican circuit is like it's a step ahead of China, but it's not a major step ahead of China, you know?
I'd argue it's actually a few very long steps from China because you have a lot of the infrastructure that's been set from boxing. They at least have that set. And you can argue that China has that to a degree. But jiu-jitsu has made some pretty major inroads in Latin America in the last few years.
I'm just looking at the prospects coming out, and I mean some of the guys that I've seen that have spent a lot of time fighting on that circuit have fairly underdeveloped games.
Yeah, this is true. See, now I switch to the dog because he's cute and he's dog. Say hi to the internet, Enzo. Hello, internet. Okay, so she's fighting Ashley Cummins, also known as Smashley, fighting out of Steve Berger MMA or Red Nose MMA. I don't know if you remember Steve Berger by any chance. UFC veteran?
Only vaguely.
Oh man. Steve Berger he beat Pete Spratt. He fought Robbie Lawler, lost to him. He beat Rich Clemente back in the day. He's got some pretty interesting things to pass along to the newer generation, and now Ashley's training under him. I believe she still is. Ashley's 8-0 as an amateur, 3-2 as a pro. She beat Steffi Frausto, who's Soyla Frausto's little sister, and Sofia Bagardai back at the first Invicta event. I don't know if you had anything if you've seen any footage on her.
I mean, I just remember. I think she's been scrappy. I haven't seen maybe a lot of really consistent sort of dominant skill development from her so far. So it's just going to be interesting to me to see whether or not she can take a couple of hard losses and if those have refocused her, and also just to see where Grasso coming off, like I say. Off a circuit that I'm not necessarily sure how well it prepares fighters for opposition coming out of bigger American camps.
Yeah, and I mean, even though Cummins isn't out of a big camp, she does have that sort of rudimentary striking that really is mostly used to get that clinch, close the distance, and then just start pressing against the cage and working from there to the ground. So if she turns it into a ground fight, well, she's going to have her hands full. that's pretty much that.
Yeah, it'll just be interesting to see if she's more physically dominant. That would be the big thing I would look for.
Yeah.
So next up, then we've got a named fight. Fairly recognizable fighters, or at least one fairly recognizable fighter and a fairly recognizable name to those who've been following other women. We have Peggy Morgan, who is now in her first fight out of the UFC.
Yes.
And she'll be taking on Irene Aldana in a bantamweight bout, who
Yes.
most notably lost. Aldana most notably lost her last bout to Larissa Pacheco, who is the sort of a hot up-and-coming prospect and recent UFC signing, Jungle Fight champion.
Yes. Yes.
In a pretty good, scrappy fight that was a really stiff test for Pacheco.
Yes.
I would actually
Although
say Pacheco was probably not winning the early parts of that fight, but was able to keep to her game and stay aggressive, and come back for a late win.
Yeah, I don't. If you're squeamish and if you're an MMA fan, you're probably following the wrong sport. But the finish to that fight, where she lost to Pacheco, was really, really brutal. So it was a hard knockout. But still, even with that loss, she's still 3-1, all pro fights. And her last win, which I unfortunately haven't been able to see yet, but I'm dying to get my hands on some of that. So if anyone can hit us up on Twitter and find some of this video, last win was by a spinning wheel kick, which I always love those. I'm a sucker for those. So I mean, she's got a really nice counter game from what I can hear from her stand up. Haven't seen much of her ground game either. But she's going to be really interesting to see against someone like Peggy Morgan, who's 6'1", the same thing that Jessamine Duke, who she last lost to, or Stefan Struve was also criticized for this. Tall fighters that don't seem to be able, probably not used to, or not being trained to fight tall, use their range as effectively as perhaps they ought to.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, it comes down to, I mean, that's sometimes it's just a coordination thing where it's just, you don't necessarily feel like you have the smoothness of technique to fight comfortably at range. And, if you're really big and physically dominant, you want to come in and press that physical advantage over your opponent. I think you see that out of a lot of tall fighters. I mean, it's, classically been a set like Seth Buksinski. He's
George
kind of
Roop
another
gets
guy.
a lot of that. George Roop gets some flack for that too.
Yeah. So, you definitely, Peggy Morgan. Unfortunately, her biggest problem is probably that she's really, really slow. Just foot slow in terms of being able to keep pace, and stay with faster, more athletic fighters. So that might be a big problem against somebody like Aldana, who definitely seems to be a much more natural athlete.
And a much more natural boxer, at least she seems to have from that background. Although Peggy Morgan also, I mean, she's 2-1 as a pro, both wins by decision. I'm not really sure. What do you think would have to be said about her defense? Because I think that's more of a liability than her actual movement in offense. Did you think that's maybe?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that gets back to just the speed issue. Is that she has to, there's so much energy used and so much focus being put on just keeping up with opponents that you end up leaving a lot of defensive holes trying to catch up and trying to stay on them and stay in range. So, being slow is that's kind of a problem that is hard to overcome, and it creates a lot of other problems for you. I mean, before his last bout, I would say that was actually one of the biggest things I was seeing out of Gray Maynard. He looked like he'd actually corrected a bit of it. A lot of it was a lot faster against Ross Pearson, but against certainly PJ Grant and Nate Diaz, he just looked slower and slower and was
Yeah,
getting hit more and more because of it.
yeah, yeah. No, that was sad to watch. Yeah, but I mean, you're right. I mean, it does contribute. It does have ramifications in other aspects of a fighter's performance. So I don't know. Maybe she'll find some sort of shortcuts or ways to compensate. Who knows? We'll see what happens.
Yeah. And so now, next up, we've got a veteran sort of classic,
Mm,
not like you want to call it the, not the silver circuit quite because Modafferi is
no.
only 31,
Yeah.
but certainly a battle of longtime vets in Roxanne Modafferi and Tara LaRosa. Kind of feels like
Yeah.
a bit of a sunset fight, even though I'm sure neither fighter wants to think of it that way at all.
No. No.
Um,
No. Not at all. No. No. I mean, this is
but
the third. This is the third fight between them. They split a
yeah,
series 1-1. So maybe that's the objective of this, not necessarily shuffling them into. I don't think that either one of them is going to retire anytime soon or anything like
no,
that.
maybe not. But
No.
I have to admit that I'm not as excited for this fight as I would like to be.
Hmm. Okay. Okay.
Like, I
Well,
think Modafferi has actually shown some improvement. Um, there were a lot of people saying that they felt like she beat Raquel Pennington.
mm,
I'm not necessarily one of those people, but I know a lot of people were like, "Oh, her striking looked way better," and even though she was, I mean, the long-standing problem for her is just that she's not ever been physically imposing enough to
mm.
consistently apply her game in the way she wants to apply it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's an odd thing because she started off as earlier in her life in judo. She moved to Japan. She was teaching English there for a number of years, and she started fighting. But I guess maybe the training in Japan wasn't the same. Obviously, the bottom fell out of the MMA scene. Not that there isn't one in Japan, it's just that it wasn't as prioritized after that as after the fall
Hmm.
of Pride for pretty obvious reasons. So she decides after the whole thing with the Ultimate Fighter, moves back to the United States, ends up at Syndicate MMA, which is an up and coming gym. They're trying to get some stuff together. They're piecing things as they come. And for someone who's got so much grappling experience and who's touted for having such the grappling level that she does, she's only got one win by submission, which I'm not sure really what that says because obviously you're not just grappling in MMA. But yeah, I mean, it's an odd thing. I don't know if maybe it was all the time in Japan, and maybe if she had been in some other camp here in the United States, she would have ended up with a scrappier style that would be a little more lax, that would maybe allow her to capitalize on certain things. I don't know if maybe that might be it, or maybe I'm missing something here.
Yeah, I just think I mean, I think it's an unfortunate product of. I mean, I don't want to sound mean to say this, but just like
No, no, it's
of,
fine.
of a classic of a classic group of talent that wasn't in big camps and wasn't necessarily that athletic. So you had a lot of people who were not getting the best training
Yeah,
and
yeah.
who were not, you weren't attracting the best athletes, and so you ended up with a lot of fighters classically who developed games with major holes in them that never got fixed because they weren't consistently facing the kind of competition that forced them to fix those holes. I mean,
Mm.
this was like what I was talking about this when was it Deshawn Jackson? I want to say, or is it
Are you
Johnson?
Deshawn Jackson? I believe is a football player.
Yeah, the Explode guy who came into the UFC recently.
I think you're probably thinking of Johnson then, if that's
Yeah,
the
I think it's
case.
Deshawn Johnson.
Right.
Um, when he came into, I watched some of his fights for Explode, and he had, this notoriously padded record.
Mm.
And it was, watching, it was like, okay, this guy's obviously a really great athlete. He's got strength, he's got speed, he's even got some, wrestling technique and some boxing. He's got all the basic tools to be a prospect, but he has these massive, massive gaps in his technique.
Yeah.
That have come from just repeatedly beating up guys that he knows he can beat. Things like giving up your back and letting some guy like sink, put on a rear naked choke because he's so bad that he can't finish it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then he gets into the UFC and he fights this Australian Jake Matthews who has, a terribly thin record and doesn't, is also a decent up and coming talent, but certainly isn't any kind of special fighter to watch. And Matthews just tooled him,
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we've already, if I know we've mentioned this or I've mentioned this before, but I don't think that those guys that are getting beat up every other week at Explode are actually fighters. I don't think they're really trained guys. I really don't. I think there's some sort of mafia front where these guys are, they owe some loan sharks some money, all right? And they're like, well, listen, you're 15 grand in the hole, homeboy. Come on out of here, sell some tickets, and get yourself in the ring. But I don't have any shorts. Don't worry. They go in there with jeans and get knocked out, and that's what ends up happening.
Yeah,
it's just
But the point I'm making is that I think on a much more legit, much more talented scale, that's some of the problems you see with classic women's MMA fighters is that they were out at times going through and fighting a lot of talent that just wasn't that well prepared, and it left a lot of holes in games.
It did, but then it makes the case for Modafferi even more confusing because you look at her record. She beat Vanessa Porto earlier in her career by TKO. She beat Marloes Coenen by split decision and eventually lost a rematch, I believe, in Strikeforce. And she's coming off 6 straight losses. I mean, you noted the loss to Pennington. She lost to Sarah Kaufman in Strikeforce back in the day. Rosie Sexton, Barb Honchak. So it really is a bit of a puzzle. There's a lot of questions here. I don't know if maybe there might be some sort of injury thing that's been nagging her, or as you mentioned, maybe it was just having a lack of athleticism and not having necessarily the sort of team that would be able to help you compensate for that in other ways.
Yeah, I think it breeds inconsistency is what I'm saying. Like you get some good performances some days when you're on, you get some really bad ones when you're off, and you're not developing the kind of consistency that you need to, like TJ Dillashaw's worst day might have been that fight against Joe Soto,
I'd argue it was probably the fight where he against John Dodson.
But I'm saying
and even still, he didn't look that bad. I mean,
yeah,
that was the finals. That was for the final spot for the actual winning the actual show. So
he was also 2 years into his pro career at that point.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean I just had this argument with somebody who was talking about, TJ Dillashaw's peaking right now. It's like, dude's only been fighting for 5 years at a max.
Yeah, that's what's scary about guys like him is that no, he's not quite at his peak yet, and that's what's scary. All that potential.
So next up, then, before we get too sidelined here, we have Edion Gomes and skipped. We have Michelle Ould and Deanna Bennett. And
this is
This is an interesting one. Ould is a name pickup for Bellator or from Bellator, where she really only had one fight, but she's not quite a name in the best sense. She's a good fighter, but she's coming in with a lot of white pride baggage.
Well, look, man, I wouldn't put it like that. I think really what ended up happening, for those who don't know, it was the usual question that pops up on MMA websites or threads every 3 months whenever there's a Cain Velasquez story. Well, he has a brown pride tattoo. Why can't I have one that says white pride? And then obviously you have to be very ignorant of context and understanding of why he has that tattoo and why this other one is offensive and unacceptable. If you have to ask, maybe there's a problem on your end. But, I mean, look, I'm sure she's a great person. I don't doubt that in the slightest. I just think that was a very ill-advised thing coming from a place of maybe ignorance or sheltered thought. Not to say she's an ignorant person. It's just, maybe it's just one of these things that people don't think about, and they go, "Hey, what's that about?" And you're like, "Come on."
No, I'm not saying she's an ignorant person, but what I am saying is that to date, that is the most notable thing about her career.
Which is unfortunate, yeah.
That's not where you want to be, because, I mean, she's not a bad fighter at all.
No, not at all, no.
But that's certainly what she's best known for at the moment.
Right. Well, I mean, look, man, it's that's the sort of thing that we'll easily brush aside, because I don't think she obviously didn't mean any malice by it. So
I'm
it's a shame, because no, I know what you mean, and it's not a matter of this isn't something that will be holding over her head forever, but it would be nice if she put on some more impressive performances in the cage, and maybe now with Invicta she'll have that platform, and we'll sort of not think of that as much.
Yeah, because it hurts that she's not. I mean, that's also the product of just, I don't think she's fought since then. So, that was her last fight was in 2012. So it has been 2 years that almost to the day that Ould has been out of the cage.
Yeah.
And that's the problem, is like, if you're fighting all the time, you can make people forget anything with a good win. But she hasn't fought for a couple years, and she's fighting Deanna Bennett, who is a rising talent by all looks and appearances.
Yeah.
She's got a win over Juliana Pena. She's she's undefeated in her amateur and pro career. She's 4-0 as a pro.
Yeah.
And she fights out of the Pit Elevated, which is a quality fight team.
Yeah, that's the offshoot of John Hackelman's spot. It's up in Orem, Utah.
Yep.
But Ould, again, not a slouch at all. She's a Team Quest product, still trains there to this day. 7-3. She's got 2 submissions, 2 TKOs, and she beat Jessica Rakoczy. She also beat Muna Holland in her sole Bellator outing. Rakoczy, I think, was at Tachi Palace, which let's not get too much into Tachi Palace. But yeah, Deanna Bennett, Deanna Bennett had also beat Colleen Schneider at, I believe, before she fought Pena. I'm not entirely sure.
No, that was her last fight, was against Colleen Schneider.
Yep. Oh, well, okay. Well, my apologies then. She's got 2 submissions on her record. I haven't really seen much footage on her. I don't really know what she's going to bring to the table, so I really can't make any sort of judgment or anything past that. But from her record and from everything else, everything seems to be in place for her to be able to do pretty good things.
Yeah, and she was a Showdown Fights product, so it's a lot of times fighters who only fight on one particular small show, it's harder to find footage on them.
Yeah.
But I'll be looking definitely if she looks like she's somebody who could break out, but she's got a heck of a tough fight for her first Invicta bout. I mean, this is
Oh yeah.
This is a big step up, even from beating. I mean, let me put it this way: it's a big step up just because I think at the time she beat Juliana Pena, and even to this day, Pena is a very raw fighter.
Yes.
So Pena is the kind of fighter who at the moment can easily win or lose to almost any reasonably athletic opposition.
Well, I mean, she's got some things that she needs to put together, but I really don't doubt that she can get everything together as she needs to. I mean, she is training out of that the same chain of gyms that Lau Beerbaum and company, Michael Chiesa and those guys.
Yeah, Sick Jitsu.
Northwest. Yeah. So I don't know. It's maybe it was because it was earlier in her career, but that's still impressive. I mean, even without seeing.
It actually was Pena's last fight before Tough. So it was right, in the heart of Pena's career. I'm pretty sure Pena's career to this point is pretty young. I'd need to look at that again, but Pena's she's actually been fighting since 2009. I'll be damned.
Yeah, but how often has she been? How frequently has she been fighting?
She fought 3 times in 2009, once in 2011. So she had a year off, or 2 years off in there.
Yeah.
and then she fought once in 2012 and twice in 2013, and we won't see her
Yeah,
until next
no.
year.
Unfortunately, yeah, and hoping she recovers from that nasty ligament injury. I wouldn't wish that on anybody, dude.
Yeah, no, that
That
was
was rough.
terrible.
That was terrible. And someone who was coming off the all this hype from the show and winning after no one expected her to beat Baszler at the beginning and making all her way all the way through to the end. So, I mean, well wishes to her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now,
Mm.
after I skipped a fight, we've got a pretty big fight
Yeah.
primed for 135 between Edion Gomes and Tanya Evinger.
Oh man.
Evinger
No.
is coming off she had a pretty poor, tough experience. She
Yeah.
was in the opening rounds and got beat pretty decisively. Can't remember who she faced in that opening round just yet, or
No.
just now.
That was one season where like the opening fights to get into the house were really, really fun.
Yeah,
That was really interesting. Yeah, but it's a shame because I don't remember who it is that she lost to.
yeah. But since
Yeah.
then, she came out and she actually put a pretty good beating on reasonably talented bantamweight and Sarah Del.
I think and here's the thing. I follow Delelio on Twitter. I love her to death because she's just tough. I mean,
Yeah,
that's just you don't beat somebody, you don't win against somebody like that in a decisive manner and just have it not mean anything because she is really, really rough. But well, eventually, I mean, it's a shame she's not on this card too. I would have loved to see that. Maybe
yeah.
hopefully she'll be on some future event. But I got a lot to say about her, man. She's cool. But yeah, Evinger, another Team Quest product. Although I think she splits her time between there and is Hit Squad still a thing? I don't exactly remember at this point
I
because I
I
believe
don't
she was splitting between both.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean she's listed as both. Trying to think who's
Okay.
at Hit Squad. I can't. Even if it is still a thing, there's nobody there. Like, there's
Mm.
nobody in that camp that is fighting at any reasonably high level at the moment. So it's not. I wouldn't say I wouldn't say even if she's splitting time there, it wouldn't be a meaningful.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, I mean, she does either way have a very interesting career because she's 13-5, one submission, two TKOs, and four knockouts. Again, one-shot knockouts that we're talking about here.
Yep.
She had that win against Delelio. She beat Karina Dam. She beat Julie Kedzie. And her losses have been against some respectable opposition. She's lost against Sarah McMahon. She's lost to Alexis Davis twice. Lost to Gina Carano way back in the day, and also lost to Vanessa Porto, who is also relentlessly tough.
Yep.
So I don't know how this is going to look. I mean, if you want, and I think this bears mentioning here, you're talking about Edian Gomez, who is, if you haven't seen it, I don't recommend that everybody see it. This is really tough to watch, and I'm sure you know where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
there's a video of her, and I don't know if it's the Rio Heroes crew, if it's the ATT crew, what this was. It was like an open sparring session with bare knuckle, straight up fights, and she fought a man. She fought some dude that was 2 heads taller than her and beat the living daylights out of this guy. And
Yep.
it's really difficult, especially with I don't know how, even with all the things that we've had lately with domestic violence and how that's been related with MMA, and especially now, I really wouldn't recommend watching it. But there is a caliber of toughness and grit that Gomez possesses and fearlessness that this is kind of who you want to have her fight. You want to have her fight someone like Evinger, who is also ridiculously tough and who can put people away with her hands if need be. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, her only losses are to two of the better athletes in bantamweight division in Ronda Rousey and
Yes.
Amanda Nunes.
Yes.
The only
Yes.
people that have beat her are, really very elite athletes. She has a win over
Yeah.
Leslie Smith.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually her biggest win to date.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah, she did also beat Catalina Malangahu, and she also beat Hiroko Yamanaka
Yeah.
from. I think that fight was in Japan. I
No, it was
remember right
Invicta.
now. Oh, it was Invicta. Okay, well
It
there
was
you go.
Invicta 4.
There you go.
So, I mean, but
There you
Edion
go.
Gomes is tough and
Yeah.
talented and a great grinding sort of volume cardio fighter. You know,
Yes, yeah.
she's not the kind of person who's gonna knock you out with one punch. She's much more the cage control, drag you down, beat you up, put you in bad positions, maintain those positions, and just work you for submissions or for a really rough 3 rounds kind of fighter.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
punishing,
Yeah.
very dominating.
Mm.
And it's going to be a tough fight for Evinger. I mean, I think it's a fight Evinger could win because she has power, and when she's on point, she seems to be the kind of fighter that's really camp dependent. Like I remember that's one of the few things I took away from her on her season of Tough she was on was it was what's her name? Not Ronda Rousey, Misha Tate saying
Mm-hmm.
that Evinger has a lot of like personal baggage that she brings with her into her camps, and
Okay.
that
Okay.
she may not be in a very good place at the time that she was in her
Mm-hmm.
tough tryout.
Mm-hmm.
And then Evinger got beat, and she immediately turned around and said like, "I'm going through a lot of stuff, and I'm not very focused, and all that." So I think there's a real, there are real questions about which version of Evinger is going to show up to fight from camp to camp, from fight to fight.
Mm-hmm.
And Edion Gomes is not the kind of fighter you want to have those questions against.
No, you don't. And it's a shame that she had that happen because I really thought she was going to do at least be able to get into the house and do really well on that season of
Yeah.
Tough. So when that came out with the whole thing, I mean, I hope she squared that away. I hope she's gotten that taken together. I mean, she's been around for a while. She fought in Elite XC, but you don't want to have any distractions when you're fighting someone who Gomez, who also should be noted, 10-2 as a pro, no amateur fights, 7 submissions in that stretch.
Yeah.
And they have been pretty hard ones to watch. A few of them, because she's just really smart with positions and all that. So I really hope Evinger can get, or at least has gotten some of that taken care of, and will be clear-headed to put on a hell of a fight. I mean, I told you I was really looking forward to this event, but from this fight on is where it really gets juicy to me. This is where this really starts to get good, and I think this is going to be guaranteed fun on that, starting from that fight on.
So yeah, next up, speaking of which, we have probably the 2 best strawweight prospects remaining in Invicta, not named Mizuki Inoue, in Stephanie Eggink and Katja Kakanpa. Kakanpa, Killer Bunny, she recently lost to Joanne Calderwood at Invicta FC7. Once again, no shame in that. Calderwood's one of the 4 or 5 best fighters in that division.
Yes.
She came back recently after that with a win over Aljana Rasahaina back in Finland.
Okay.
And Rasahaina is pretty good developing fighter herself. And that was a pretty dominant win, if I remember it correctly, for Kakampa. She looked like she'd actually really worked on a lot of the things that she, a lot of the gaps that maybe Calderwood exposed for her.
I'm sorry, but is there anyone that has a more, not only is it cool because it's a Monty Python reference, but is there anyone who has a more apt nickname when it comes to violence than her with the Killer Bunny thing?
No, she's pretty fantastic.
She gnaws at you little by little, and then she just clamps in, and you're like, "Oh shit, where'd that come from, man?" She's impressive, man. She's good. I mean, what is she? 9-1, 3 submissions. She beat Mei Yamaguchi, Aisling Daly from Straight Blast Gym, who's now on Tough. She beat Juliana Lima. Her only loss to Joanne Calderwood. I mean, that's if that's the only person you lost to, you're good. You're in decent company.
Yeah, she is a quality strawweight, and she's facing Stephanie Egink, who is very much also an up and coming, decent looking fighter. Unfortunately for her, well, not unfortunately for I was getting I always get that I get XFC and XFS confused far too often.
Oh, okay.
Unfortunately, she's coming off an XFC three fight run, all over solid veteran competition. She beat Heather Clark, who's currently on Tough.
Yeah.
She beat Angela Magana, who's currently on Tough.
Yeah.
In that run.
I think that was for the. Was that for the XFC title? I think.
It might have been. I'm not. I unfortunately, Sherdog doesn't show that.
Well, she won. Yeah.
She
beat a solid up.
And then she beat Brianna Van Buren, another up and comer who is 4-0 as an amateur, 3-1 as a pro, with a win over Patricia Vidanek, and her only loss is to Stephanie Egink. So Egink is definitely a quality strawweight prospect.
Yeah, Egink is legit. Egink is, again, another one who's taking a step up from, I mean, not to take away anything from XFC, but Invicta is just a different thing. It's got a different set of eyeballs on it. And, 3-1 as an amateur, 4-1 as a pro, beat the opposition that you noted. And what's scary about her is that she's got it's very notable that she has a boxing or sort of a boxing base. I guess that's where she started, or maybe she's just done extensive training in boxing. Very comfortable. She's got some really fun footwork to watch. She's really good at moving around and striking and choosing her shots. But I don't know if you saw that Magana fight. She won that one by triangle. Actually, after she had a little trouble on the ground, she was confident and patient in her guard work. And she's hunting for submissions while she's there. It's just a little deceptive, but she's got that going on there too. So again, up in the air. I can't make a pick here, but this is going to be guaranteed violence between two competitors that really know how to strike and chain things together. And this is going to be a lot of fun as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think probably Kikan probably deserves a slight favorite, very slight, but it should be a great close fight. A lot of fun, and is a great. It's a great co-main for what Invicta, for the roster Invicta has right now. I think it's a solid high level prospect matchup. And then of course we have the main event, which I will say I get it. I'm not unhappy with it, but it does not feel like the best fight Invicta could make.
Well, I mean, look, I would have probably... Jessica Panay is not around anymore. I would have liked to have seen a rematch or something, but I'm not upset. I think there probably could have been a better matchup, but I'm not upset at all.
No. I mean, I want them. Michelle Watterson is a star worth building. She is a great, very publicly presentable, good on the mic, just nice, wonderful fighter, and she's a lot of fun to watch. And so I don't. I think I have no problem setting her up for a fight that she's almost certainly going to win. But against Yasuko Tamada, that very much seems to be what she's getting, is a fight that she's almost absolutely certainly going to win. Tamada seems like kind of the prototypical Japanese circuit vet in which she's lost to most of the really tough competition that she's faced, and most of the people that she's beat are not great.
Well, here's the thing with that. Tamada, she trains out of that AACC camp, which is they seem to be more of that Carl Gotch old school. What led to Japanese pro wrestling back in back in the day. So it's a lot of that catch wrestling oriented style. I agree with what you said in terms of the opposition and some of the people that she's faced, but she is still a veteran of a couple organizations such as Valkyrie. She fought in Jewel. She fought in Deep. She's been around for a while. She's at a 15-8 record with 3 draws. So what is, we're talking about someone who's had 26 fights at this point. I really think she'll make it a fight. I don't think this is going to be some sort of crazy blowout. I think she'll have her moments. I obviously would favor Waterston very, very heavily to win on this. That being said, I mean, it's still going to be fun. I wish that there were perhaps someone who were not necessarily a bigger name, but someone who were maybe closer on the talent scale, or maybe that's a bit harsh, but someone who were maybe a little closer in that skill set. And I mean, you know what I mean, of course, when I say that.
Well, I mean, both to her credit and against her, Tamada has never lost by anything other than decision.
Yes.
With 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those decisions being contested. So we're talking 5 majority or split decisions here. And but she's only won twice in her whole career by anything other than decision.
Right,
so
2 submissions. Yes.
She's very likely. I mean, even from just a raw skill set thing, it's the kind of thing where she's not likely. She's likely to make it a tough, scrappy fight, but she's also consistently shown that she doesn't have the tools to put Waterston in danger.
No, I mean, she doesn't seem to have that sort of power in her hands. She does seem to have a very clinch-heavy style. And it's odd because she trains with Megumi Fuji, She trains with Hitomi Akano. What's her Girl Fight Monster is her nickname, I mean, it's odd because you see that and you go, okay, well, maybe you don't really see a series of tendencies that you might see in a certain camp sort of distributed and spreading to her. I don't know. She's sort of got her own thing going on in that sense. She likes to hold up against the cage and work from there for knees and stuff, but I don't really see her bringing anything that could, as you mentioned, put Waterston in danger.
Yeah. So it's a fight that's really made more to showcase Waterston as a champ than anything else. And I mean, I think hopefully as fans, that's what we got to look for and hope for, is that Waterston gets a showcase win.
Yeah, and you have to also wonder what else is there to come from the atomweight division. What other fighters are there in weight, and maybe is there going to be another event soon where they'll have a bunch of those fights on the card? I mean, we had a couple of 115ers here and 125ers. I don't know. Maybe they'll do something there to sort of help things out and get Waterston some opposition. I mean,
yeah, I'm trying to think. Did they have any other? Jody Escobar and Jinyu Frey are atomweights. So
yeah, but
we maybe Frey, as we talked about, could be somebody that they're looking to develop out of this, but we'll see. Yeah, there's not a lot of there's not the same noise about atomweight without Penne and Waterston together in it that there was a year ago. And, obviously with strawweight, even after the UFC's picked it over, you've got big strawweight fights. And you've even got a couple interesting bantamweight fights. I mean, it's interesting that atomweight has not quite got that same pull yet.
Yeah, that is interesting, but maybe they'll work towards that. At least I certainly hope so. And for Waterston's sake, I mean, 14-3, all right. And she did have one kickboxing fight, which it was a loss that I won't hold. Obviously, no one should hold against her. But she's got 7 submissions. People who call her, the nickname the Karate Hottie because she's a karate black belt and all that. But then you look at how she's won some of these fights, and let's be real, I don't know if the fight against Penne, I don't really think that anyone expected it to go the way that it did, or that it would be that exciting. No. And it was. So, there's hopefully maybe they're going to be able to build from the regional circuit, get some pull, and find some other 105ers that'll be able to round out the roster. Because at least Invicta's back. At least now you kind of have a semblance that they'll have a more stable future from here on in, and maybe they'll be able to do it. At least I hope so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that pretty much covers the card. Any final thoughts before we get out of here?
No, not really. I'm just happy they're back and looking forward to this. They won't have any counter programming or interference. It'll be on Saturday, and I have Kat. Say hello, Kat. Yes.
Oh, well, on that note, on the kitty note, remember to, if you enjoyed this video, remember to like it on YouTube. That's important. That's how I derive most of my self-worth. That's the thumbs up button.
Yes.
It's, remember to like it. Also, subscribe to MMANation.com. That's DOTCOM, the most useless of SEO unfriendly names possible. But subscribe there because that's how you get updates on when we're going live with new videos, on all the content we produce, all our excellent shows, Knuckle Up, Vivisection, Sixth Round, Bathrobe Review, all that good stuff. And if you want to follow us, you can find me on Twitter at TheZaneSimon and Victor at Vic M. Rodriguez. And until next time, we'll be back tomorrow with the UFC Vivisection. Connor, I, and Dallas, I believe. And for those of you, this will be up Friday for the website, so that doesn't mean anything to those of you seeing it on Bloody Elbow. But you can expect a sixth round after the UFC event, and I'm sure Nate will do a bathroom review and all the usual shit. So until next week, until next time, until next video, talk to you later.